Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to have a discussion around this critical topic of how to help MSMEs survive, but then also thrive under this COVID crisis. And we've got a great set of folks to have this conversation with. We've got Ms. Shoko Noda, who's the UNDP country representative here in India. We've got Sangita Reddy, the current FICCI president and also JMD of Apollo Hospitals. We're also joined by Mr. Sanjay Bhatia, who's the MD of Hindustan and also within FICCI really leads the MSME work. And then, of course, Ravi Venkatesan, who's ex-head of Microsoft, ex-Bank of Baroda, and currently the founding member of the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, which also looks at promoting MSMEs. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll get a chance to hear from each of you on your specific perspectives around this. But just to set the scene, 110 million people employed in the MSME sector, second largest rate of employment. And really, when we talk about the word enterprises, and we use that word very loosely throughout conversations, in reality, 99% of those are sitting in that MSME space. So India really is the country of very small businesses. And these businesses are under severe pressure, depending on what reports you read. There's a 30 to 50% extinction rate that could come about as a result of the COVID crisis. Some of the work that we've been doing and looking at how families are experiencing COVID suggests that people employed within MSMEs are already this month have lost around 60% of their income. There are things that are being announced to help, working capital loans, but given most of this sector is highly informal and especially not part of the formal financial space, how are they going to access cheap loans? This ability to get working capital is a real issue. So I think there's a lot there to deal with. It's also an opportunity, given that employment and welfare will be an incredibly important aspect of coming out of the COVID crisis. How can the MSME sector really help drive this? So let me kick this off by maybe starting with one of what I think is a central debate here, which is there's going to be a knee-jerk reaction to say, look, huge extinction rate amongst MSMEs is possible. How do we protect? How do we protect what was there? At the same time, we've always known, even pre this crisis, that the MSME sector needs to be reformed. There's big changes that are coming from a global trends perspective, opportunities to take on, but at the same time also formalizing the sector. And can this crisis be used to get us to where we want to get to long-term faster? So Ravi, I'm actually going to turn to you on this first question to say, what is your thought around balancing this idea of protecting what is there today and helping a lot of these current MSMEs survive versus what is necessary for MSME sector to thrive in the future? Are these things sometimes in conflict? And what is your thought on what really helps them thrive?
Well, my instinctive reaction is to agree with the way you've set up the question, which is even pre-COVID crisis, the MSME sector in India is large and quite underperforming. You have a large number of enterprises, but equally, many of them are not just informal, they are stuck in a low productivity, low wage rut, low quality rut. We have, when you compare ourselves with any other reasonable sized economy, an extraordinary phenomenon which is called the missing middle, which is you've got very large number of really small enterprises which are stunted, not many mid-sized firms, and then at the other end, plenty of large companies that we're familiar with. And so, you know, in any economy, the real engine for job creation are these small enterprises, which as they grow bigger, create lots of jobs. So we've got this situation where, because this engine is not firing as healthily and well as it should, is not creating as much employment opportunity as India needs. So this was pre-COVID. Now you've got COVID raging through this like a forest fire. Okay, and you know, most of these enterprises operate with less than 15 days of cash, and already the shutdown is extended for a month, and you know, who knows how many more clampdowns we'll be forced to have. So the extinction rate that you talk about is, I think, very real. And to me, 25% sounds like a reasonable, but probably a low estimate. But here's the good news. The good news is, you know, in game is in the business of talking to lots of them every day. And we're seeing many of them beginning to adapt to the crisis. So the better run firms are doing all the things that you would consider prudent, which is conserving cash, finding new opportunities, already thinking about how to repair their supply chains, which have been disrupted, and so forth. And so, you know, post-crisis, you can imagine that these firms will become much more hardy and resilient. The issue, though, is the one you point out, which is depending on what we do or don't do today, depending on that, what the new forest that grows back after the crisis over the next 4 or 5 years could either be a really healthy one with lots of productive, reasonably fast-growing enterprises, or it can be replaced once again by a large number of necessity entrepreneurs, still very informal, very low productive, etc. So I think what we do today, the choices we make are really important. So for instance, there is this instinct. I've seen many policy recommendations come out from a couple of states. And there's this instinct to peanut butter liquidity. Okay, they all need liquidity assistance. So we need to do this across the board. The reality is we're not, you know, the capital is going to be precious. And so you want to do two or three things. One is you need to protect workers more than you protect firms. That's a really important principle, which we've seen from the US. The second one is you want to try and find a way to get this liquidity assistance, working capital assistance, to the most productive, efficient firms, rather than the least productive and effective firms. Now, it sounds a bit Darwinian, but I think that's important. Number three, you've got to figure out a way to get this liquidity to them really fast and through the channels that they use, which is not large public sector banks, but rather the little MFIs and little NBFCs and so forth. So that's kind of the really short-term things. Through the conversation, I would say we also need to start doing today two other things. One is really using this crisis as opportunity to dramatically make it easier to do business, both to start businesses as well as to operate these small businesses, which is today horrendously difficult in most states. And the other thing I would say is we need to talk a little further and unpack what we can do to stimulate a massive wave of entrepreneurship. Okay, how do we get many, many more people coming in and starting the next generation of these enterprises, some of which go on to be quite successful? I was looking at a research report that I think one of your people circulated, Gaurav, which was from Carnegie or Rand, which says after every one of the really severe depressions in the US, okay, 1932, 33, 2008, etc., while there was an extinction of firms, there was also a surge of entrepreneurial activity afterwards, which is good news. And then I went back and said, who are some of the companies that were born right during or after a recession? It turns out to be HP. It turns out to be companies like FedEx and so on and so forth. So I think there is good news here potentially if we are strategic and thoughtful about what we do and equally what we don't do.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to that point about entrepreneurship, but actually let me turn it to Sangita about to respond to something you said. You know, as an industry body, right? You have that pressure of, to some extent, many of your members wanting to preserve certain status quo, and at the same time, people who want to sunrise industries and so forth who want to see change. So, I mean, do you agree with Ravi that there is some good news here and there's a way that this crisis can be used? Or do you see a huge amount of pressure to preserve the status quo?
I think the world has changed so tremendously and drastically that there's no question of preserving the status quo. But what is significant and important, I think, is preserving jobs, which he said, and preserving businesses. So let me, be very clear that, again, we shouldn't waste a good crisis. And this is a significant crisis on the scale of which we've never, ever seen in our lifetime. It's the war of our generation. So we must find ways to use this. But before you set up and get ready for innovation, redesign, rethinking, opportunity scoping, retraining, and all the wonderful things that should happen, I think the first thing is really maintain jobs, keep businesses alive. And towards that, the first significant thing, I think that we as FICCI have propounded this many times. We've written to everybody in terms of the powers that be. We've used every media channel possible, and I'm happy that we can talk to all of you and use this channel. So our proposition was really way up on the list, was to say that 110 million people are affected by MSMEs. We need to give them interest-free, collateral-free loans to MSMEs, guaranteed by the government, and anyone with a turnover of less than 500 crores must be given this for a period of 6 months minimum and hopefully 12 months. We also said that if you calculate this amount and really look at it, even if 1 lakh crores is given, taking an 8% interest rate, this is only 8,000 crores, which is 0.04% of our GDP. India can afford this. MSME deserves this. We need this as a first step to re-stimulate, because even when the lockdown opens, many MSMEs are saying they don't have money to pay salaries or even money to buy raw materials. So it's important to restart the engine or energize the economy, which is today in a medically induced coma. And a small tap on the shoulder is not going to be enough to reawaken this very important engine. So that is step number one. But I think the very important aspect which was spoken about in terms of, they are currently caught in a cycle of low quality, medium or, lack of innovation. And this is a perfect time to really break that cycle. And therefore, I think imagining the businesses of the future, whether it's, AI enabled, looking at machine learning, adding 3D printing onto it, creating a quality assurance engine. And then again, in this new scenario, are you not going trade exhibitions, calling on corporates to sell, all those, that world is going to change. So a huge learning curve in terms of using the new age mechanics for marketing, for connecting with people. I think that's going to become one of the big needs of the environment, of training. And then I think new business models which will emerge, because I believe that we have a great opportunity to look at collaborative business. Everybody tries to do everything from start to finish without specializations. So if they got together in specialized clusters and then created value chains amongst themselves in MSME. So this is going to need some future vision and envisioning. And then also, most importantly, to have, whether it's government or large corporates, assist MSMEs in tapping this opportunity of the disrupted supply chain. So, I do see a tremendous opportunity, and I think that opportunity will become very well used if we first help them survive, then go on to envision, partner, train, and then handhold and support. And then we'll create a very, very vibrant sector, because the entrepreneurship, the skill set, and the hard work of this sector is one of India's biggest strengths, and we should ride on that strength.
Thanks, Sangita. I mean, it's a great narrative, and I think a little bit also describing a future that feels like what the Japanese economy was so effective at doing in terms of creating very specialized SMEs and clusters. And so we'll come back to that. But maybe Sanjay, as someone who sort of understands the ground realities or is constantly hearing from MSMEs, I mean, is some of this really possible for the large percentage of MSMEs? I mean, are they even going to be able to access some of these loans, given how informal they are? What is it that they're asking for to be able to both survive right now but thrive in the future, as Sangita was mentioning?
I totally agree with what Sangita said and Ravi said on the quick liquidity help or the working capital help to the MSME sector. I think the important thing is, obviously government today is trying to balance between life and livelihood. So, which is a tough thing to do, but livelihood is equally important, that how do you really sustain it. I think important thing is what she said is the preserving business. For me today, my short-term lookout is that how do I really see that my investment is safe, my employment is safe, my entrepreneurship is safe. I think that is something which is important. You see, we are going to lose, as Ravi said, 25 to 35% extinction might happen. You see, I don't know where would those employers go. I think there's a big challenge. This unfortunate thing, whatever has happened, this is like a war, as has been said. I think the first thing for me to look at is restart the businesses. How do I restart? I'm not sure whether my people will come back because they have migrated to their homes. I don't know how many out of that will really come back to and again join my plant, because there is a loss of skill. I have to really see that how do I prepare for that. I think that's a big challenge for the MSME. I think what we are, you talked about the long-term thing, but for us, I think it has to be consolidate our needs into short-term solution and long-term strategy. I think this is what one has to really see, how to really balance between the two, because the whole gamut of business is going to change. Working from home or going for automation or totally changing the businesses. As far as opportunities is concerned, I would say that there would be opportunities, but they may be sector specific. They may be coming up in, let's say, making mask, making sanitizer, making PPE, or maybe the investment which may come from China to India, the companies who would move here. So they may be sector specific. So with that, what more opportunities will come for MSME, and how do we, I mean, the business which I have established in last, let's say 30, 40, 50 years, whether that is going to stay or no, whether my whole investment, the whole family's money which has been invested into the MSMEs, how protected it is. I mean, what is going to happen? So there's a total uncertainty which is there, but one has to really face the facts, and we have to really prepare for whatever is there. So important role here would be played by the government. I mean, in one of our interaction with the government, from a very senior official, he said we are treating it as a marathon, and there would be a small packages which will be coming. Like they announced one package for the very unfortunate, the poor people, but they still have to come out with the packages. So we'll just wait for that, how the FICCI's recommendation and the recommendation of the chambers and all that, how the government is really addressing them. If they are going to address that in piecemeal, I think this may not work at this time. I mean, we are looking for a big reform. I mean, this will give an opportunity to government also to do various other reforms which were pending. Maybe it opens for them also. But at this moment, the important thing is to really see that how I can bring back my business and be on the track again, because I'm already off the track. And that is what is, I think, important.
Yeah, no, that's great. But I think you see the tension between transition, the fact that there is a transition that's needed, versus actually, are you actually prepared for the future? And I want to actually, it's a good segue to Shoko, because the UN bodies, UNDP gets to see these things from across countries as well. And there's clearly, you have a sense of the kind of different place that MSME sectors are across countries. If you look at India, what is that transition that needs to happen? And how could we be using this to help our MSMEs be prepared for that future, including some of the opportunities that Sanjay started to talk about?
Transition. When I was thinking of what to share with you all, actually my memories came back. My family actually used to run a sake factory in Japan since the end of World War II. So it's a family business. It's been there for quite some time. So maybe Sanjay, I can associate myself with you. And suddenly in January 1995, the huge earthquake hit Kobe. I come from Kobe in Japan. It was a devastating situation there. It's in a way, it's a different nature, but it's still a huge crisis, and huge crisis would hit the whole sake industry. because Kobe is the best known for sake production within Japan. We have the biggest how to say the industry there. So my family was one of those who are hit. And sake factory is not huge. It's usually a family business. There was no support from the government at that time. I was so worried about my father because he worked day and night and was so worried every day. So after that, the earthquake, sake industry never really picked up the speed as before. But what I have seen, two things. One, the business model itself changed, including my father's factory. That the tanks were all affected. There are cracks. They could not use some of the tanks. So we had to actually ask another company to produce some sake for us, and that became actually more cost effective while keeping our brand. Also, as you know, things developed, not my father's industry, but as a sake industry, they started to use sake not only for drinking, but for cosmetics and others. Those new ideas, new business came up after the earthquake. And I do hope that in India, it will be the same. I think Sangita, everybody you mentioned about importance of keeping jobs. I'm very proud that my father did keep all the employees in the factory and did not fire, and that's very important. And also, not only in Japan or in other countries, also in India, MSME is the backbone of bigger industries, right? So we have to keep them alive. Otherwise, think of, for example, Sony. Think of Toyota. They all rely on smaller factories to produce parts. So it's not like we cannot also think of just MSME as a different part from bigger industry. They are interconnected. This is very, very important to provide needed support from the government in this most difficult time. India is a champion of ideas, innovation, and technology. So I am sure that also organically there must be a lot of ideas coming up from those small entrepreneurs. I think the legal environment is also very important, how we can actually protect them. Especially there are a lot, informal people many people are working in the informal sector, 80% plus. So I think, and then this will not be the last crisis that we will see. So I think to formalize some of the sectors and then how we can ensure the protection of livelihood of many people. 40% of the total employment comes from this medium and small enterprises. So protecting them, I think, is critical. I think for the whole economy in India to recover.
Thank you for sharing such a personal story. But the story does really emphasize the need for entrepreneurs to be entrepreneurs, right? And so let me go back to something that Ravi and Sangita had also mentioned. Out of past crises have come a surge of entrepreneurialism, but it's been entrepreneurialism that's been growth oriented. People have started businesses and then hired others. And traditionally in India, we've seen high degrees of individual entrepreneurialism, which is almost by necessity, but not necessarily with growth mindsets of trying to create larger and larger businesses. How are we prepared for the opportunities? Now, coming out of this, there will be a huge need for entrepreneurialism. Lots of traditional jobs will have disappeared. But are we actually prepared for that future? Do we have a young workforce that is ready to be entrepreneurs? Do we have those conditions? And Ravi, you've been looking at this from a game perspective. Are we ready? What do we need to create to make sure that there are entrepreneurs ready to take on these opportunities?
We're not ready, but with a little bit of interventions and effort, we could be. So that's how I'd put it. So you're right. I think it's really important that the people on this who are dialing into today's webinar understand this distinction which you made between necessity entrepreneurs who tend to be largely self-employed versus growth-oriented entrepreneurs who are driven by an opportunity and therefore end up with an enterprise that grows and hires more and more people. So what happens after these kinds of crises and resets is there are a lot of people who, just to stay alive and feed the family, start an enterprise. You see this as much in the US and Europe, and as well as here in Africa. But in India, for whatever reasons, too many of them remain in that self-employed state. Whereas in certain other ecosystems, the conditions are better, more favorable for at least some of them to start on a growth path. So, so what we need to figure out is how can we get much more of this growth orientation? And that's some of the work we've been doing with our partners. So for instance, what we find is the raising aspirations may be one of the simplest ideas and one of the most powerful ones, which is in a geographic location, like a district headquarters, a city like Hyderabad, Bangalore, whatever. How do you really create a network of these enterprises, of entrepreneurs, and showcase successes? How do you showcase the people who are surviving and beginning to revive and eventually will thrive in this crisis? And that inspires many, many more people. We are finding with our work with women food entrepreneurs in Bangalore, for instance, that this sort of peer network is really important for raising the aspirations and also learning from each other. We're also finding from our work in Delhi government schools. So my co-founder, Mekin, and his outfit, Udyam, they work with Delhi government and together run one of the largest programs in the world to teach young people to, what the entrepreneurial mindset. And it's and they learn this not just by sitting in a classroom and listening to a teacher, but they actually get together in groups and launch little businesses, which they run for 3 months. And it's astonishing to see that even in that socioeconomic class, how quickly young people see opportunities around them and can go after these things. So what I'm pointing out is the importance of these kinds of catalytic interventions. And so right now we are working with Government of Karnataka to set up this district network. In the crisis time, the next few months, the focus is going to be on just supporting these SMEs survive and revive. But quickly after that, we hope to repurpose them into these kind of entrepreneurship facilitation networks. So that would be my thing. Now, for instance, there's a really important point here. Everybody is seeing the China opportunity, that there is going to be this trade dislocation between China and the US and Europe and China, and who but India? It is our manifest destiny to step into that breach, okay? Adventure, okay? So you've got to see many more entrepreneurs sort of go after that. And then when some of them start succeeding, there'll be more and more mimicry and imitation. Eventually they'll come to FICCI and said, look, we need some policy reform and to create a more competitive sort of environment for us to go to really, really flourish. And that's how that whole flywheel needs to start.
I actually want to bring Sangita in on this, because let's get very specific. So Sangita, you obviously have so much knowledge of the healthcare industry. So for people who are listening, just to make this very specific, let's dive into the healthcare industry. What are these kind of new opportunities that you think are going to come out, where if you're today a young person listening in and thinking, you know what, I could actually be engaged in starting a small business that is a new opportunity post-COVID. What are you seeing in your supply chain? How can we reimagine the way it's structured today versus how it could be structured in the future?
I mean, superbly interesting question, and thank you for that. I first want to say one quick thing to Ravi and say, Ravi, thank you. FICCI thanks you, saying that you'll do all the immediate tough work and then refer it to us. So please make sure that's your role. Make sure you get that doing.
That's not what I meant, but anyway.
I know. We'll talk offline. So, but coming back, Gaurav, I think that across the healthcare sector, you have, of course, the small and the medium nursing homes, and then you have the larger hospitals. I'm going to talk first about the larger hospitals that I know, and then move into the distributed ecosystem. I think there's going to be innovation large-scale innovation, number one, in the extent of primary healthcare which is required. Because healthcare has now become center stage, topic of discussion, and one of the weakest sections in the country currently now are actually primary healthcare. But the innovation which is going to come in this sector is that healthcare will move, a significant portion of it will move from the large hospital to the clinic, from the clinic to the home, and from the home to a 24/7 ubiquitous access to care enabled by the mobile phone. This huge trend is going to facilitate digital healthcare and telemedicine. Before this crisis, we used to do about 100 teleconsults per day across the country. Today, we're doing more than 900 teleconsults a day. And this is not the free consults that we're doing for COVID-related patients. Those are in thousands. This is the paid, official, replacing outpatient visit. So the world is definitely changing in terms of using technology to enable care, changing the place of care, and also the point of care is also changing in that home care is coming. So this is one huge trend. Now, in this trend, there'll be multiple players which will come in. So say, for example, medical consumables and medical devices. To enable this remote care, you need a connected glucometer, you need a connected thermometer, you have an asthma patient, you need a connected SpO2 measurement, the pulse oximetry. So this type of making of these devices in India is going to become a huge and very exciting potential opportunity. The papers are full of how Indian manufacturers are now making ventilators and making them cheaper and faster. So we're using Indian innovation and capability to come in there and say, how can we fulfill a need or a gap? And I think that necessity is indeed, cliched as it may be, necessity is indeed the mother of invention and innovation in our day and our time. So I think medical devices is one huge sector. Import substitution is another. Let me share another data point with you, which has become as you know, large organizations start looking at where do we cut. It's not just manpower that you want to rationalize, but an important one is your supplies. I discovered that 60% of our supplies are directly or indirectly from abroad and therefore dependent on the dollar or the international price. Import substitution is going to become a wonderful opportunity for India to really look at what they can produce in India. And for this, you need scale and you need quality. And that's why I was referring to earlier about this concept of clusters. Because if you look at a simple tubing system, you know, which connects the patient from IV to the IV bottle, there's a needle which is very high precision, which a small MSME can't make. But if they get the needle and then there's a connecting gasket and then there's a piping. If we hive this off into 3 different factories and then put it together and do the assembly and the sterilization, so you have one large needle manufacturer, one large tube, send it out to different regions, let them assemble, sterilize, and then deliver to local hospitals. So this will disrupt the manufacturing process and the supply chain. So this needs a bit of design and coming together. But the fact is that we can save hundreds of thousands of dollars. We can create and innovate new products and therefore re-engineer the delivery system. So there's some exciting times together if we really think through this. But of course, we do have to first survive. And for this, we need the government to input and help us revive. And after you've revived, then let's reimagine and retrain and bring this new cadre of MSME into our country, which will really become the lifeblood of the workforce and the economy.
It's a great example. It's an example you're given in healthcare, but the principles of that example feel like they could just be applied in every sector. And maybe just to build on that, Sanjay, given the connect with MSME, one thing that's certainly coming out for everyone who's not just surviving, but just trying to eat is just the importance of hyper-local, right? Suddenly there's, we were in love with centralization, we were in love with large companies, and suddenly we're back in love with our local person because that's the only person who's with us today on this journey. How is that an opportunity again? Do you think we can think about post this crisis, a reorientation of consumers back to locally manufactured, local producers, local suppliers, because there's a stronger sense of community and resilience amongst them? And is that an opportunity for MSMEs that you're seeing?
Well, if you really see in this time, the mom and pop stores, very frankly speaking, so as we call them, the small grocery shops, where in different colonies or different localities, I think they have really come to the rescue of everyone when the lockdown is there, and they had been really servicing the requirements of the people, the day-to-day needs. Well, you see, I am from the packaging industry, and talking about packaging and MSME, if you really see, it cuts across all the sectors. It's not, I mean, healthcare, or it's not food or whatever. MSME goes across all the sectors. I mean, Ravi talked about the ancillaries for the big units and all. I think they are obviously there. But similarly, packaging, especially in the food, pharma, and drink sector, beverage, food and beverage, and pharma also. These are the three big sectors which are very, very important for the packaging sector, and where most of the packaging is going and the important. I mean, whether you need to sanitize or whether you really, what kind of packaging you need. I think there, I would say that the lots of opportunity will come in that sector. India still, normally what you see, the packaging in any country, it has been seen that it grows double than the GDP growth. So if the India, I mean, today in India, the growth is about 13-14% in the packaging sector. But if the GDP, we are able to sustain in India with the new opportunities and rebuilding all that, I think the packaging would grow double than that, because that is the requirement, because packaging helps to bring the product to the consumer. I mean, unless and until there's a good package, which is there, the consumer will not get the product, whatever you may call it. I mean, the food process is one of the examples which is there. Processed food, you preserve food through packaging. So you have to bring all that to getting that to retail or to the consumer. You need a packaging. So I would say that there would be an opportunities coming from that point of view. One should really look at that, I mean, in what sectors it is there, because in various sectors, there is already, it's at the initial stage, but the new packaging, which is not there today, India can always introduce that and get into access those technologies and introduce that into country to look at those opportunities.
Great, thanks, Sanjay, and thanks for inviting more competition into your industry for you.
That's fine.
That's kind.
That's fine. As both of them, Sangita and Ravi, said, we have to survive and revive first. So let us see. So let's do that first, and then see how do we really take on.
And I think in the interest of time, this is a fascinating discussion. I think we only have one more chance for one more question. I'm going to direct it to Shoko. And so, because I now learned from your last answer that you're from Japan. So I actually think this is ideal, because a lot of what has just been described is actually where Japan took its small, medium enterprises to, which is, extremely thriving, highly decentralized, plugging into supply chains that still, you have the Toyotas, but 4,000 other suppliers supplying the Toyotas, high tech and so forth. Perhaps you can use that experience to describe what could be the equilibrium, or the better equilibrium for India's MSME sector 3-4 years from now, coming out of this crisis. What would it take for us to get to that sort of capability that the Japanese economy is structured on?
I'll be away. I have been away from Japan for 22 years. So I'm not sure whether I will be the best reference to describe about Japan, but maybe let me go beyond Japan and just globally. I think this, it's for me difficult to say that this is an opportunity, because people are suffering right now, but it's a possibility. A lot of possibilities are there. And one thing that, as also a development practitioner, what I want to see is the new business model with sustainability embedded there. The climate change, also women's empowerment, and the other sustainable development goals that we've been talking about, SDGs. I do see that if we embed it if we really incorporate SDG elements in the business, I think we will become much more resilient as a society. And then I especially just would like to talk a little bit about women, because I am myself being a woman and very passionate about, women's empowerment. Here in India, if I'm not mistaken, like 40% of those medium and small enterprise are owned by women, right? So it can grow more, and with this the new ecosystem, which we will be soon seeing, gives more opportunity for women. I mean, the locations of work can be changed. I mean, now that we now know that we can have this kind of webinar, being away from one kind of stage or hotel conference room. Many women, I know that especially those young girls, have difficulties just commuting to the office. But maybe with this opportunity, we see that we can work from home, so that obstacles can be overcome. We have seen that. Also, so the combination of technologies and flexibility of location is a huge advantage for women. And I really think that, from the entrepreneur side and the government side, we can support more women to come and join a smaller and the medium scale enterprises. From UNDP side, we have been supporting those especially young women to enter the first job and then also the work. One of the obstacles that I have heard directly from those girls are transportation. So I think that would be great if they can have more flexible working environment. We have been also providing mentorship support to them. And again, it's obvious that with I think it can be, we don't need to have classroom even to do. So there are even more opportunities for women to join, and this is something that we can take it forward. And then I'm very impressed with Sangita. You are there, and I hope you can remain as a role model, and then even more so in this difficult time, to bring more women in.
Fantastic. Thanks, Shoko, for both bringing the sustainability and the really important gender angle in, which actually both of those things push both the hyperlocal and the digitization trend that is going on, because both will be helped with that. I think we've run out of time, because I think this panel is fantastic and you guys have so many great perspectives. So apologies for that, but I think the main takeaway, and the takeaway really needs to be for our audience, and we have a lot of people who I think will be looking at this, seeking out opportunities, and potentially also facing dire consequences on existing jobs as well. But I think there's hope here. You've described, like in history, whether it was the Great Depression, whether it was the 2008 financial crisis, whether it was the Kobe earthquake, that from these things rise entrepreneurs. And if we can truly unleash entrepreneurs, then I think that's a real opportunity for us. I'll allow any sort of closing comments. I think Ravi's got his hand up. Go ahead, Ravi.
Well, we've come up with this nice framework of survive, revive, thrive. But as Sangita and Sanjay have pointed out, first you have to survive. And I think we glossed over the point that this package to aid MSMEs with their liquidity crisis, there's little point if it comes late. Okay, but then, I mean, Sangita used this nice metaphor of a patient who's in coma, and merely giving them a vitamin ain't going to do much, and that too if it's much later. So one of the takeaways is the urgency for the whatever package, and that it can't be happening in metered doses over time. It better come in some reasonable strength soon. I think we glossed over that point, and I think we will focus more on who gets it when it comes, whether it should be the more efficient or everybody. I think that's an important point. But the first thing is we do need to see much more than we have, and much sooner than it appears to be.
Great. Thanks, Ravi. Any other sort of closing thoughts or builds on that?
So I think that I would reiterate that, FICCI is available, is working very hard and fully appreciates the power, the strength and the need of the MSME. So our package to the government, or our proposal for package to the government, was very clear actually. It was a collateral-free, interest-free loan for 6 to 12 months to give the stimulus. Just adding to the point of how do we disperse this, how is it collected? So there's a series of recommendations which I can't make in a short one, whether it's using the financial platform which is connected to their larger ecosystem, whether it's the NBFCs. So various things that we can do to not just enable the liquidity, but do it in the right manner. Speed is of course of the essence, as we've spoken about. And I think parallelly also this whole thing on re-education, commitment to quality and standards, all these after the first two steps are equally important. But I just want to say FICCI is available, is working hard for MSME, and we will remain connected into the ecosystem.
Sangita, just a quick one. There's a consortium coming together to try and very quickly now create a $100 million SME stabilization fund, which gives these low interest loans. So can we work together with FICCI on this? We'll send the concept note across. It's moving along quite well. We're interested in getting more allies and moving faster.
Happy
Sure.
to, and it's completely in line with the work we're already doing. So Sanjay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. I think what you said, Sangita, is absolutely. I think this is the time now for the government to help us to start, provide logistics support, relax the guidelines, what is there, and remove the fear psychosis. I think that's something I would say is very, very important for us to restart or survive or thrive and all those things. I mean, it's important at this stage that is what has to happen. As Ravi said, small dose will not work. It has to be the right dose so that this can really put the industry back on the track. Going forward with the opportunities, we really don't have to create job seekers. We have to create job providers. I think that is what the FICCI is doing. That is what everyone is looking forward to do that. And for that, of course, the venture capitalists or the startups and all those things, I think those things will become important, that what role they play. This $100 million fund, what your stabilization fund is welcome. We'll be very happy to work together. And of course, with Sangita being there in the panel, I think we have a support from FICCI on this, and FICCI CMSME where I'm involved. So we'll be very happy to work together on that. Thank you.
Gaurav, sorry, one very last line to all your viewers, that is stay safe, stay healthy, and follow all the things that you've learned now about good healthcare. And once you have, continue to follow it, because this virus is not going away. On May 4th, the virus does not disappear. So social distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands are going to become part of the new normal. Being a healthcare person, I can't stop without giving you that message. The second one is that, health is beyond the virus as well. So, MSMEs are typically the people who neglect their health. So take care of the medical portion as well as the financial aspect. So, and all the best to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you very much.